A few years ago, I was present with one of our church members at UVA in the emergency room after she suffered a brain aneurysm. She didn't have immediate family to call, so they called me. I rushed to the emergency room. It was 10 o'clock at night. I told the front desk who I was, and before I knew it, I was standing with the doctors and nurses doing my best to help. My job was to hold her hand, to put my face in hers with doctors and nurses all around and ask questions to get her to respond. Are you in pain? I asked. Squeeze my hand if you are. Are you scared? Squeeze my hand if you are. One of my last questions to her was, are you afraid to die? Her eyes locked with mine and she squeezed my hand. And I knew we were in the valley of the shadow of death. And she did too. We did this for 2 hours before the doctors put her into a medically induced coma, which she never came out of. Her last cognitive human interaction was with me. Each time I'm in these moments, I'm reminded of how unfair death is. There aren't simple answers for what happens in the valley of the shadow of death. No parent should have to bury their own child. No teenager should have to wrestle with unanswerable questions. No senior adult should have to fear death alone in an emergency room. But yet every day they do. And we still do. I've come to terms with this fact. And I'm convinced that we really don't have adequate enough words to understand death. Life unfolds as it will. Things happen. And we're left finding our way out of the valley of the shadow of death. And it's hard. And as the pastor in the room, I'm under no preconceived notions that there's a sentence or a phrase or a thought that prepares a family for what death brings. But words do have to be shared. And we need to be careful which ones we use because their implications are immense. It's easy to tell people, God's testing you, or the good Lord giveth and the good Lord taketh away, or God's just bringing God's angel home. At best, these sentences are unhelpful and way too simplistic for the complexities that we face. At worst, these phrases damage our understanding of God because they reinforce that it's God doing the killing. And that's what the valley of the shadow of death wants us to think, that it's God who did this. It's God who punishes us. It's God who does the killing. But that's just not true. And I know it's not true because I believe in what King David sings in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. God doesn't cause the hurt or pain or confusion that life brings. Instead, God steps in the middle of it, calms the waters, restores the soul. God leads us down right paths. And we can fear no evil. For as King David sings in verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Our loved ones may no longer be with us on this side of eternity, but we're comforted in knowing they are not gone. They are with God. I love David's imagery here. God, the great shepherd, is leading them away from death's sting, away from harm. And the great shepherd has prepared a table for them in the house of God. At least this is what King David sings again in verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Even though our loved ones, the ones who walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though they face the darkest of all things, even though the months and the moments to come for us were or are unscripted and unknown, we too can fear no evil, for we have the blessed assurance that our loved ones are with God. We used to think death was the place where no hope was allowed, But Psalm 23 shows us it's actually the exact place hope springs. Psalm 23 may be the most comforting words in all of the Bible. They remind us that God is the one walking through the shadows with us. If it was true for Israel, I think it's still true for us today. Just remember, God isn't causing your hurt or causing your grief or causing you to suffer any more than you have to. God is the one walking through the shadow with you. And there's hope to be found in this today.